Roger Gray, who's the CIO of University Superannuation Scheme, the second largest pension fund based out of London, joins us on the show right now with a quick perspective of what he's making of the current market situation. Roger, it's great to have you on the show. First up, you'd increased your exposure to EM equities in 2011 to about 7.5% of the total EM assets. What's the sense? What have you been doing all of 2012, and has there been a further increase to that number?
Yes, in 2012 we've taken the emerging market equities weighting in our fund to 8.5% in the strategic asset allocation, and we've introduced an emerging market debt allocation of 2.5% of our fund. So overall the emerging market allocation has gone from 7.5% to 11%.
Right. How much would be your target allocation? Because you have said in the past that you're looking at increasing your allocation to EM equities in the future as well. From a 3-year perspective, how much more increase can one expect?
I think at this point we don't have any particular plan to increase the emerging market allocation over the next few years. If we look at the emerging market equities piece alone, our overall equity allocation is now targeted at 50% of the fund, and emerging markets therefore are 17% of that. That's a fair margin above the split between developed markets and emerging markets in the MSCI indices. That's about 12.5% in emerging markets at the moment. So I think we're fairly well set for the next few years with these allocations.
Well, you had a positive view on India. Have allocations to India increased in the last 6 months despite the slowdown and the macro concerns, or have you been cautious for the markets?
Yes, I mean, obviously, at some point in the past we had a positive view on India. In fact, in recent months we'd been slightly negative on India. That's been to do with concerns about the macro environment and the political policy paralysis. Now that we've seen the fall in the market, and that includes obviously the large devaluation in the currency, in fact we have moved to an effectively neutral position at this point.
How do you see India faring among emerging markets over the next 3 years? Will India outperform EMs, or will there be a story of consolidation with a specific sector bias?
Well, I think the political landscape and indeed the extent to which things get done in India in terms of policy is a very important determinant of whether India outperforms. I think break policy paralysis and India is well placed actually to be a strongly performing market.
Roger, what's the view on India's macro situation given the falling currency, sticky inflation, GDP slowdown, policy paralysis? I mean, I can go on and on. Lots of people are given these names. What's the view here?
Well, I think it is muddling through. I mean, growth has come down, and there clearly are structural issues to do with sort of infrastructure in India. But as I mentioned in the last response, if we can get beyond the policy paralysis, India's got a great deal of potential.
Where would you capture value in India right now? Do you think there's opportunity coming in the Indian bond space, G-Secs, corporate bonds, Indian equities, or even currency for that matter?
Well, the only area where it is actually presently relevant to us is in the equity domain. India continues to be a restricted market as far as debt is concerned. There will be some change going on with India coming into the emerging market liquidity indices. I think in September of this year JP Morgan will be adding them. So international investors that have a sort of a money market kind of allocation to emerging market debt will find India within their their universe at that point. But at the moment, the only one of those areas which we're engaged in is in the equity investment side.
Roger, what sectors does USS or you, let's say, like in India?
Well, we like consumption. Tata Motors would be a good case in point. That's more sort of global oriented, and ITC more domestically oriented, and also some of the banks, I should say, in all these comments I'm talking about the private sector rather than the public sector companies. HDFC would be one of the bank institutions we like.
Right. Finally, Roger, before we let you go, the big talking point for India has been a potential downgrade by S&P. How much do you think that would impact perception for India versus other BRIC nations, and perhaps influence your decision on whether or not you want to increase your exposure to the market?
Well, as I mentioned, we don't have India as part of the sort of debt exposure per se. I mean, the pattern around the world has been for emerging market countries to experience upgrades and for developed market countries to experience downgrades, and that's been very pronounced. India is the first BRIC to be downgraded below investment grade. There are problems in India. The budget deficit of, if you take the central government and the states, of 8% of GDP needs to be addressed. There are issues to do with excessive subsidies, which clearly are behind that. So I suppose my response is we may be more likely to invest in India for the reason that hopefully the body politic in India will respond to this and not let this downgrade turn into a greater crisis. As I mentioned earlier, if we can get beyond policy paralysis and take some of the necessary decisions, that should be very good news for India over the next few years.